Good morning, and this is the Community Revitalization Show. Um, we will be joined here in a little bit by our guest for this morning, Jeff Dangremond, and he has let me know that he's having a bit of challenges of getting on board as a guest. And I also will be joined by Bill Houston with CrowdMax as my co-host this morning. But while we're working through those details, since this is live streamed and we are in motion, as they say, I'll give you a little bit of background on who we are, what we're doing, and where we're going with this show, with the newsletter that is being published, and what our plans are for working towards community revitalization. And in that regard, also, this program is put on by RCI Community Funds. We're a new organization just coming into existence that is intended to create a series of investment funds, each one of it which is dedicated to a particular community. And our goal is to help a community turn around, start rebuilding, or contribute to a rebuilding effort that's already underway. Uh, um, and as a result, hopefully we can create enough impact, enough momentum that this community can begin rebuilding. It can start thriving and go that direction. So with that, I'll wait here for the rest of the team to join. But here's how we plan to go about this. We intend to put together a community revitalization plan for a particular community. We're currently looking at several communities, but we're zeroing in on one at the moment that will probably be our starting point, our pilot demo project. We intend to put money into the community through a fund, which will be its own entity, and we'll be using a model that has been developed by the National Coalition for Community Capital, also known as NC3. And within this model, to minimize regulatory burden, 60% of the money will be invested into real estate projects within the community, and 40% will be invested into local businesses. So the 60-40 ratio is critical to conforming to the regulatory guidelines. And the investment in the real estate will be direct, meaning that we will have a ownership in the title of the fund, not through an intermediary or other company, because that would be viewed as an investment in another business, and we have to stay within the 60-40 rule. With the 40%, then we can invest in existing businesses, new businesses. We intend to recruit and help install businesses who have turnkey models to come into the community to create immediate jobs. But each time we invest in a local business, we are going to require that business to work with us and support our investment in residential property, in commercial property, and in community property. So as we break that out, the real estate investments, we want to create housing. Some of it will be retrofit of existing buildings. Some of it will be new build. When we work with commercial space, we are looking at retail, commercial offices, and light industrial. And then when we talk about community space, this may be a meeting center, it could be an artist gallery, it could be any other type of a program that will address and service all the residents within the community. And so having this integration where we're checking as many of the boxes as possible with the investment fund, working to have them work together so that each one is complementing the other, we believe we can get to a point where it is possible for us um, uh, to get online and make all this happen. So we're working behind the scenes as I talk to get everybody on board, and hopefully they'll join us here in a little bit. So a lot of people say, well, this is all good. How are you different? What are you doing that everybody else hasn't already tried, hasn't already done? And I think there are a couple things that we are planning to do with each of these funds, which may make us stand out or have us viewed as being a different approach. Because of the integration I just spoke about, where we invest in businesses and real estate at the same time. And then we work with the businesses or to put their workers into the residential property. So we achieve full occupancy of the property. We work with the businesses to take space in the commercial, retail, office, or light industrial. So we have full occupancy. We will ask the businesses to support or tithe, so to speak, a percentage of their earnings into the community space. And by doing all these different things, this will allow us to create kind of a synergistic, catalytic type of effect that we believe will then allow us to find more investors to take us out of our initial investments. This allows us to pay back our original investors. And then beyond that, we can then reinvest money into the community. So the fund ultimately becomes an evergreen fund, as they're called, or a sustainable fund, where we continue to make investments into the community. And we do this in a way that helps us make a greater impact, have greater chance of success, and create better metrics for the community in which we're working. So while I'm waiting for Bill and Jeff to work through the issues of getting on board this morning, which we have with us in the audience, one of the other members of RCI Community Funds, Bill Houston. Bill was our guest last week where we talked about investment crowdfunding, the new Reg CF approach to letting everybody invest into a local business, or in this case, a local fund. And we showed that it changes the dynamic, it changes the capital market, and most importantly, it allows a community as a community to build wealth locally, which is one of the keys to making this different, to making it something that is not a one and done, and in which we can have an ongoing impact and not simply been here, set up shop, and then disappear like a circus coming into town. But we're here for long-term benefit. And with Bill, we talked about investment crowdfunding, working with a fund. And this is one of the other things that we think that we may be able to bring to the table that has not been done well, or I will say all the time with other groups, is we recognize that the local community, as much as we want them to invest and be part of this project so we can hold wealth in the community, invariably they don't have all the money needed to do all the things that we have in mind. So through a Reg CF or investment crowdfunding campaign, we intend to bring in outside or external investors into the community and have them participate in the project so that they are contributing to the money and we're creating a larger capital stack. Bill follows that up with a new question, which is how do we intend to bring in institutional impact from family offices, foundations, and other institutional funders? Well, we have several ways in which these groups who have an interest to share in our mission to participate in a crowdfunding campaign where they have the opportunity to become an investor in the fund. A lot of people may not be aware of this, but a foundation can invest in a private business. It can take an ownership in that. And it's really not much different from where they put their money that is in reserve into a mutual fund or some other type of investment. But in this case, they can invest into the fund, they can participate along with the other investors in the fund, and whatever profits are earned by the fund, they will participate in them side by side in the proportional to the amount of their investment. The other place where I think that they may play a greater, higher role is once we have the fund in place and before we deploy any money, before we make any investments, we intend to leverage whatever dollars we've raised into the fund with debt financing. So this would be like construction loans, mortgage loans, loans to the businesses that we are investing in. And again, this is a place where a foundation or family office, institutional people, they can work with us side by side where they loan money into the retrofit of a multi-use building that might have retail space and a community space on the first floor and residences above. And so they may loan money for the construction or for the long-term mortgage on that building. And to the extent that they can give us interest rates below market, then that benefits everybody. They make a return on their investment rather than a grant. They can give us money at a lower cost, which means that we can reduce rents to the tenants, both residential, commercial, and community tenants. And it will also help us flip the property, so to speak, to allow us to reach a point where we can pay off the investors in the fund. And we can roll this over into ongoing investments within the community. And then finally, there's a third way where we see we can work with these groups is they may have a particular mission, which is to help women-owned businesses or BIPOC businesses, or they want to put up a greenhouse as a particular type of business as part of an urban farming local food program. Or they may want to put money into a workforce training program for all the new jobs that we're going to create. So in that case, we call that matching funds, where they can put their money into a program side by side with ours, where at that point they make their own investment, or it may be a grant, or it may be some other form of deploying money into something that will help amplify everything that we're doing and give us that many more ways of moving money into a point where it's all working together and it's not working separately. So we have a number of things going on here, and I'm struggling to understand why we're not getting the response we want. So hold on just one moment while I send out some new links. And see if this comes up with something that might be better than what we tried before. Anyway, we'll keep working on this until everybody can get on board. So what we're doing now is we're interviewing communities. We're gathering information, doing due diligence on the community, what's going on, their need to step into an underserved, economically distressed community. And with that, then we're going to create a campus plan. If you think about this, where you've seen a neighborhood that's vibrant and everything's looking good, we're talking about getting to a point where Jeff has now joined us. Yay, Jeff. Um, and I'm going to try to send this to Bill. Bill got it at the same time, so hopefully Bill will join us soon. Um, so Bill, if you would you like to join us in the studio? Feel free to take the link I just sent you, and you can be a co-host in the show while Steve is supposedly in the audience, and we'll work from there. But if you're comfortable where you're at, stay there. So Jeff, I'm glad we worked through this. I don't know why Restream was giving me multiple addresses that wouldn't work and then changed its mind and gave me a different link. But I'd like to welcome to the show Jeff Dangremond. Jeff is a member of the RCI Communities funds team, and he is on our team. We have all these different backgrounds and experiences, and Jeff's is in impact investing. So what we wanted to talk with Jeff today was about what is impact investing, how do people invest into a community, why would they invest into a community, and those three simple questions will probably take us 4 or 5 days to work our way through, but we only have to the remainder of the hour. So Jeff, welcome this morning. Please introduce yourself, a little bit of your background, and then we'll kick off with the first question today. What is an impact investor?
Carl, thank you, and thanks for your patience in terms of sending out the links to get into this. Usually, it's easier. I know sometimes technical glitches take place, but I know it's not your fault. Once I got that last link, I was able to sign in pretty easily. So here I am, and I'm very happy to be here this morning to talk about impact investing. I think it's important to really lay the groundwork in terms of what impact investing is. And it's a strategy that aims to generate both financial returns as well as positive social and environmental impacts. And there are a number of aspects to impact investing that are important, that really define what it is. And in a moment, I'll get into the differences between impact investing and traditional investing, and impact investing and philanthropy or philanthropic investments. But as far as impact investing goes, one of the key definitions of impact investing is that it has dual objectives. The dual objectives that I noted just a moment ago, which is it seeks financial gains alongside of beneficial outcomes for society and or the environment. There is a level of intentionality associated with impact investing. Investors intend to create positive impact, not just as a byproduct of what they do. There's a range of returns that investors can take a look at. Investors, I've dealt with many over the course of my career, and they have different motivations. Some are on that very focused Friedman like, I want profit, I want my stock price to go up, I want to make as much money as I can. And others have a greater realization that there's more to life than just that. That there are things that you can do for the benefit of society and benefit of each other that raises all ships, which is an important thing. So there's an intentionality about impact investing that I think is an important aspect of people who decide to go that route. And as I mentioned, the range of returns, impact investors can, on a spectrum, kind of be weighted more toward the return side, or they could be weighted more toward the, the benefit to society or environment side. And that's the same, I think, spectrum that exists in terms of traditional finance, which is solely focused on profitability and the increase in assets, and the philanthropic side of the spectrum, which is don't care about that at all. They just want to, provide monies for projects that are beneficial to society and to the environment, without any focus at all on returns.
Yeah, so we've seen, I think the catchphrase that's easiest for a lot of people to grasp is called putting purpose ahead of profits. And purpose is wide open in terms of what it can include. You've described social benefits, environmental benefits, and sometimes those are the same thing, because if you have to clean up a brownfield in a community that is causing health issues, then you're getting two boxes checked at the same time.
Yes.
So, so for our audience today, we talked a little bit earlier before you came on board about how we're going to go out to raise funding for this community. We have like 3 different places where people can participate. One is to invest into a fund for a specific community.
Correct.
One is to help us leverage the money raised into the fund through debt financing for construction, mortgages, and other types of business loans. And then the third is to supply what I'm calling matching funds for a particular program or project. And so with that, I'm going to introduce Bill Houston, who's a member of our team, and we're all here together. This kind of reminds me of our inaugural show 2 weeks ago, where every few minutes somebody else would add to the team, and it showed our team building capabilities as we went forward. So we have Steve in the audience, who's a member of our team. Bill was our guest last week talking about investment crowdfunding and all the different ways that we're going to work to bring external money to match with internal money of the community, to help the community grow, build wealth, and try to trap as much of that wealth in the community so wealth building is taking place everywhere. And so Jeff has been talking through what is impact investing, and from our standpoint, where we talk about revitalizing a community, we kind of take the approach that everything we're doing is impact investing, that it meets every definition of purpose, social cause, environment, you name it. These community funds, although we're doing real estate investments and business investments, we are doing this to create economic vitality that will check all these other boxes that we've talked about. So, Jeff, at this time, I would like for you to share with Bill and I what is an impact investor, and I'm meaning that we've talked about impact investing, but who are these wonderful people who walk the planet, who need to be identified and requested to join in our adventure here? Because as far as I know, they don't have a hat like a Broncos hat. They don't have a tattoo. Maybe they do have a tattoo on their arm that says, "I'm an impact investor." So who are these people? Where would we find them, and so forth?
I have always dealt with this idea of this magical forest where, you could go find, clients and individuals who want to invest in things, and it really doesn't exist. It is something that really goes across the spectrum in terms of the types of people who are interested in and who actually participate in impact investing. One of the other things that I've heard is that, oh yeah, someday when I get rich or when I get wealthy, this is what I'm going to do. And really what I try to encourage people to think about is that you can have a tremendous impact without being, Bill Gates. Certainly Bill has a fantastic impact, especially with this foundation. But at the same time, you too can have that impact in terms of what you do in your community, if in fact that's something that you're interested in focusing on. So there are a number of different motivations that individuals have for doing that. They do want to help their community. Maybe some of them want to leave a legacy, um, in terms of what they've done in their lives and the wealth that they have built. Others want to mitigate risk. There are people who say, if I've got a stronger community, then it helps protect against community decline. It helps protect against hopelessness that can exist in those situations, and for that reason they are trying to catalyze this change. So
Bill, yeah, so Bill, you've worked with lots and lots of crowdfunding campaigns, and most of them are achieving some high level of impact because they're local, they're small businesses. And in my mind, even though it's not a one-to-one equivalent, investing in a small business in a local community may be one of the greatest forms of impact that somebody can achieve. Um, have you been able to reach out and identify impact investors, or do you have a secret sauce on how you find impact investors to come into one of your crowdfunding campaigns? Bill, we can't hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes, maybe I didn't have anything important to say there. Yes, I was saying that's a very interesting question because in a local community capital investment crowdfunding campaign, every investor is actually an impact investor. I think the real question here is how do we find the larger, more institutional impact investors? I haven't necessarily been able to find that secret sauce. I look at people who identify themselves as impact investors, and one of the main pushbacks that I've experienced searching for these institutional impact investors is they always want to know, with good reason, how are we going to be able to document and demonstrate the impact with their dollars? And as I say, with good reason, and I truly understand that, and I think I think that's the real question that we're asking today and trying to answer. That is number one: how do we demonstrate impact, and what are the metrics that we use to demonstrate impact? And when we talk to those institutional investors, I think being able to put that on the table initially is what is really important, so that we are both playing on the same field, and the goalposts don't move as we negotiate an impact investment.
Yeah, I appreciate this request for information because too often you see people doing greenwashing where they claim they're saving the planet, and when you look at it, you say, I don't see that you're doing anything new or different from anybody else. I don't see a net result coming out of it. And I think the ability to measure success of a campaign, which for those of you who are watching the audience, we started a newsletter for RCI Community Funds, and it comes out once a week. It's a weekly thing on LinkedIn. And we put out our third edition yesterday that you can subscribe to. And within that, I laid out some of the metrics that we're talking about potentially using for RCI community funds. And from my standpoint, some of this is pretty straightforward in that it's obvious. If I, through RCI, we create a new residence, we put a new roof over somebody's head. That's one new residence. If we create a new business in the community, that's one new business, but it might be 5, 10, 25 jobs in that community. So these are all things we can measure pretty straightforward. And I think everybody should be doing that. In fact, I know a lot of small businesses that I advise. I asked them, I said, why do you not have your own impact scorecard in your offering documents? Because your very existence is helping the community. Every job you hire is good for the community. Every dollar of taxes you pay to the local government is good for the community. These are all measurable. So, there really is in some ways no excuse for a small business not to do this. And we're working through developing our own scorecard and each community will be a little bit different, but they're going to have a lot of these same elements. Where it gets harder is when you say, well, did we improve the lives of everybody in the community, which is a very subjective question. And there may be some, I will call it indicators, not hard data, but secondary data. Like in one of the communities we're looking at now, there's an area median income of about $29,000, which is very, very low. And if we go into that community, we create these businesses, create these jobs, we're going to push that area median income up. We're hopefully going to push unemployment down. Hopefully we're going to push incidents of crime down. There's a number of different things. Again, there are measurements for these. They may require going through third parties or waiting a period of time to collect the data. But I agree, Bill. These institutions, they say, if we're going to put money up, what are we going to get for it? And if we're putting purpose ahead of profit, how are we measuring the purpose outcomes? And I think that's important for anyone who's thinking about either raising money under the banner of impact investing or anyone who's an impact investor to ask those questions, because so many times we in our group have worked in programs, projects, economic development things that at the end of the day, you go, did we accomplish anything? Did we make the situation worse rather than better? And quite often you go, well, where were the metrics? What were we trying to accomplish? And everybody goes, well, we built a new building. Yeah, but if there's nobody in it, or somebody broke all the windows the week after you completed construction of the building, you're not helping. So I think we're going to continue to work on that, and we're inviting anyone who has their own social metrics scorecard to exchange information with us, because we're learning as we put these funds together. We want them to have the greatest possible impact and see how that works. So Jeff, you're on the hot seat this morning as our guest, and we've talked about now measurement of social metrics. We've talked about who impact investors are. We've talked about what impact investing is. Why is it not happening everywhere all the time? It sounds like there's no downside to this.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of reasons. I think that there are not mechanisms in place, and everything that we've talked about so far really speaks to that. When you're talking to institutional investors, what gets measured gets managed. That's the mantra of institutional organizations, and so they want to see this. Well, how do you do that? How do you set metrics at the beginning of a project, not knowing exactly what they'll end up being? They can be aspirational. This is what we want to do. We want to create this many jobs. We want to educate this many people. We want to increase the income by this much in this particular community. We want to remediate, a certain number of properties, whatever the case might be. You can set those aspirationally, but then how do you motivate people then to invest in that? And I think a lot of it has to do with what we spoke of earlier, which is there are a number of different motivations that people have to come into a project to make that happen. And it's finding those motivations, I think, that are important. I don't think there's one secret sauce to this. I think that when you're talking to institutional investors, you have to speak to them in a certain way. When you're talking to individuals who might have a particular idea or component of the project that is their baby, it's what they're really wanting to focus on, that you find out what that is and you're able to talk to them about that and provide them information related to that. These are the number of houses that we're going to build, or these are the number of students that we're going to educate, or whatever, these are the number of skills that we're going to teach in this particular community. and then that piques their interest and gets them involved because that's the thing that they're focused on. But yeah, there is a gap. There is one other thing that I think complicates this somewhat, and that is there's recently been a Supreme Court decision, the Chevron decision, that really takes away the ability for agencies in the United States to dictate certain standards and metrics that are involved in terms of environmental issues or health and housing, whatever the case might be. And it puts it onto the judicial side. And I don't want to go into it too much, but basically what it does is it makes people unsure. It makes them unsure of how to measure certain things. It makes them unsure of the playing field, how stable it's going to be in the future. If you have the judiciary deciding, on a blanket level what's important, then it might not be applicable to a certain community, and it might stifle the investment in that community. So that's something that's just come up here in the last 60 days with the Supreme Court ruling, and I think it's going to have a continued impact on what investors do. I will say this, that investors in general have a huge amount of power because they own the companies. They own the companies that they're invested in. And whether you own one share or millions of shares, you have a voice in that decision-making process, or at least the direction of that company. Not the day-to-day executive decision-making process, but the direction of what a particular company does. And so that's where investors hold the power. There are a lot of people that don't want them to have that power. And I think that's what you're seeing with decisions like Chevron. It wants, they want to take that power away from investors and make it so administrative or so judicial that people are not motivated to invest in things. And that's sad to me. It's not right. I think that will change in the future, but it remains to be seen, I guess.
I reviewed that decision, and I think that too many people are trying to make it into something it's not, or overstate where it comes from. I think part of what contributed to that is that we had different government agencies saying that now publicly traded companies, which doesn't involve any of the companies we're talking about, but that they would be required to report what they were doing in terms of purpose. And there was no guidelines as to what they had to say, how to say it, so forth. And yet if they didn't say something, they're talking about taking them off of the public exchanges. They were going to punish them for not doing something that was not defined, that nobody agreed upon as far as definition. And so I read this decision as more of you can't mandate good, so to speak, within a regulatory standard. You can ask them to report things, but you can't hold them accountable when everybody disagrees on what it is that you're supposed to do. This is a problem with a lot of legislation where federal and state legislators will throw something over the top as a new law, and they go, we'll figure it out later, which tends to fall on all of us to go, well, how does that work? And I think it did create a chill where people are going, well, I'm supposed to invest in this, but I don't know what this is, and I don't know when this has occurred. And so they want to wait and see. And this is not good for us. We're talking about getting stuff done yesterday to deal with problems that go back decades. And as a consequence, we need greater clarity. But in the meantime, us adventuresome people are going to move forward. And we may end up helping them set guidelines, helping them define metrics, helping do that. So these are all different things. So Steve, who's in our audience, who's a member of our show, threw up this question about how do we identify worthy community project opportunities in both a financial and social investment result. And this is a really hard question. In our group, it's an ongoing conversation, discussion as we're trying to figure out our own selection process, because we're going to start with one community, just one. There's my number. And as we started researching the concept of, how it's defined, what is an underserved community, just to the point we've just been making, the U.S. Census Office says there's over 62,000 underserved communities in the United States. But when we looked at a number of the neighborhoods, communities that we wanted to work with that we think are capable, none of them were meeting this definition. So we're like, well, if this is not an underserved community, what is? So we're still kind of digging into this, trying to figure out where it's at. But if we stop talking about this, I'm going to say at the definitional level, the academic expose on this topic, what makes a project worthy? To me, that if we just drill down, we pick any particular community that looks like it's in trouble, it has need of help. Defining what is a worthy community almost becomes easy. You can say this community has been left behind. This community is suffering from high unemployment, low availability of residences. The cost of residence is high relative to the income levels. There's lots of different things that tell us this is a community that could use help. The next question is where do you start? So we are still working on that, trying to pick a first community to move forward with. But by the census definition, we have at least 62,000 choices. If we use a different measuring stick than what the Census Office is using, we might have 250,000 potential communities that need help, both urban and rural. And so how do we go about selecting one? And we saw a lot of this analysis occur a few years ago when they passed the Opportunity Act at the federal level, and they asked all the states to designate 25% of their economically distressed census tracts to qualify for new tax incentives. And this is a program that, like a lot of programs, sounds good on its face, isn't being fully implemented, and we have a long ways to go. But here in Colorado, what they did is they put everybody in 3 boxes. They said, this community is doing fine. If we put an opportunity zone here, it would be wasted. It won't do anybody any real good. It's not creating any new incentives to invest. Well, it's creating new incentive, but they're going to invest anyway. Then they put another box, was this community is in such trouble, we don't think it can be salvaged. And without saying so directly, they're saying this community is dying, and we don't think we can bail it out. It's probably not going to recover. It's going to continue to move in a downward trend. And then in between that, they identified, and each state did it differently. But in Colorado, they said, we think this area has potential to grow, to create jobs over time. And we're hopeful that by emphasizing this particular geographic area, it will spill over to the other areas, including those where we're not sure if we can be of any help. And I kind of see that is way RCI is approaching the selection of communities. We can't help those who are totally in trouble. Community Investment Fund cannot fix that by itself. At the same time, we've seen communities have already gentrified. They've already replaced everybody in the community with high-rise condos for people making high incomes. And that's the wrong place for us as well. So I guess we're using the Papa Bear, Mama Bear, Baby Bear approach, where Mama Bear is a community that has potential. We see people in the community working already to try to help turn it around. So we're going to be working in collaboration with other people. I don't see us as the Lone Ranger. I don't see us as the White Knight who's going to do all this good work by ourselves. We're going to pick communities where we feel we can team with someone else to make good things happen. So, Jeff, to that point, what do you think are the kind of things that you would be looking for that, I'm putting on your impact investor hat. What would you want to see? Where would you like to see work happen? And what are the, if you call it indicia, telltale signs? What are the symbols that you look for that a community has a chance of being turned around and rebuilt?
You know, such great points, Carl. All of them, and I think one of the primary points you're making is that you have to build a collaborative framework. That you have such a diverse group of people, the people who live in the community, the people who can champion the project, the people who invest in the project, the institutional investors, the community development, financial institutions that are there. You have such a diverse group. So establishing that collaborative network is very important. And something else that we talked about earlier is conducting a community assessment. You know, you have to go in and assess what the needs are of that community. Of course, the natural tendency is to want to do everything for everybody, and you can't do that. But what you want to do is you want to create that foundation that those things can happen at a later point. And so you gather both, you know, qualitative and quantitative information to make that happen, to understand what the situation is, to understand what you're focused on, to understand the potential for things to happen in the future. And that's identifying priority areas. You've identified those priority areas that you're going to focus on, and you use that collaborative framework to really understand and assess how that happens. And you can do the SMART SMART framework, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. Is what SMART stands for as far as that. And so you say, does it meet the minimum qualifications in each one of those areas for me to move forward? You develop that a particular theory of change. You say, this is what we're looking to do, looking to happen. And I have to say too, my background, especially an academic background, pulls me through and allows me to define things through the types of things that I'm talking about. And so it may sound academic, but I think it really works. I think these frameworks work. It's working with people that you have a common goal with, that there are outcomes that however you get there, from whatever perspective you're looking at this, you're looking at that same outcome. You set realistic time frames. You align your financial and return impacts to the extent that those are necessary. And you continue to do the things that touch on everybody within that framework. That collaboration is so critically important. So I could go on. There are any number of different ways to do that as far as that collaborative network. And I think something that you mentioned earlier too is very important, not only for RCI, but for anybody that's doing this, setting up a mechanism, a way that you can look at and understand this. Being able to go down a list and say, have we thought about this? Have we thought about this? Have we looked at this? Is very important. And I would say, and I would encourage us to share that information, to the extent that we create that. I think it's important for us to share that as well. What's worked for us? What are the things that, are the absolutes that you have to have in a situation like this to be successful? What are the hard decisions that you have to make? The risks and the challenges that are associated with a project like this. So, like I say, there are a lot of things that are involved in this that I could go on about probably for a couple hours. But I know we don't have that time, so I'll be quiet now to let you ask the next question.
So basically, as you're talking, Jeff, you're working through a due diligence list that you would commonly use in investing in a singular business. And so, Bill, from your perspective, if you're saying, hey, we're going to invest in a community instead of invest in a single business, would you use the same due diligence checklist, or what would be new or different in a due diligence review of a community that you would be looking for to give you comfort that your investment's going to return something in the form of both profits and purpose?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I see things a little bit different, having lived and worked in these communities. I see it more as not underserved communities as much as disinvested communities, right? The invested dollars are just not there. Having grown up in the Cincinnati area and seeing communities that were bad communities, for lack of a better term, when investment came, those communities absolutely changed. I think that looking at the amount of dollars that people have to spend um, is something that's going to be very important metric. Do people want to spend that money in their community? Do people in that community want to get a return on investment? Do they want to not have to travel so far to spend their dollars? Because these are dollars that they already have and that they're already spending. So when I think about that due diligence, it's is there an infrastructure? Are there mechanisms in place that allow people to invest in their own communities? Is there a mechanism in place that allow people to shop in their own neighborhoods, in their own communities? Because again, when you think about this on a more macro level, those dollars that are in those communities are being spent somewhere. And if there are no businesses, within those communities, if the homes that people rent are owned by people who live outside the community, it's not as though those dollars are being spent or not being spent. They're being invested outside of that community. So when I think about due diligence, I look at how many people live in a community, how many people need housing, how many people or how much money is spent on retail spends. And if you invested in those communities, you allow the people in those communities to invest there, would there be a possible return? I think that's a kind of a different way of looking at it. Because so much of the infrastructure is extractive, right? In these disinvested communities, right? Again, it's not that these people are not spending money, right? Because they have to live too. It's just that all their dollars are leaving the community and never returning. All those dollars are never creating jobs. All those dollars are not helping people to become homeowners instead of renters. So when I think about that due diligence, I look at the people in those disinvested communities as, do they want the same things that other people want? And of course they do. So how do we create the infrastructures that allow them to participate in the economic system that we have? I hope that wasn't a word salad, and I hope I really got to some points about how I see that differently.
No, and I like the use of disinvested much better than underserved or economically distressed, because the underserved tends to position everybody in the community as a victim, which is a term I don't like to use. I think it doesn't give the people in the community credit for who they are and what they're doing. And economically distressed is kind of I will call it a bland metric. We know something's not working, as you call it. It's a bad neighborhood, but it's not bad because of the people there. It's bad because they don't have the dollars that are sticking home. And so, in looking at communities for investment, I think as you're pointing out, we don't want to put money into a community just to watch it walk out of the community immediately after we make an investment. We want to be throwing out anchors that hold that money, in the community, allow it to build within that community. So one of the things that we will be looking at is the stickiness, and that use of website term. If the money comes into the community, is it going to stay in the community, or is it going to pick up legs and walk? And I remember I worked on an economic development project for rural communities once, and they said, we're going to recruit all these businesses in. I said, you don't want to recruit large businesses. And they go, why? That's what we want. I go, now if they get too large, they're going to leave your community. They're going to go to a big urban area. So you actually don't want a business of too great of a size. You want it to be ultra local, hyper local, and stay in your community. They understood the point I was making, and they changed their focus on recruiting in some small high tech companies to rebuild the fabric, the industry within the community in a way that it would be local and stay local. And we have the internet now where you can work remotely. We have jobs that are high tech that can be performed, or products and services performed or built almost anywhere. And if we can get those into a community where they can live, work, play to all the businesses that are there, then yes, the money stays home. And I think that's a very important distinction. It's one of the things that we're going to continue to focus on. And to Jeff's point, as we learn these things, we are planning to set up an academy within RCI community funds to share this information. This program is part of that effort. The newsletter is part of that effort. But we're going to be putting on some educational programs where we're going to try to give a more condensed version of what we've learned, and make it available to community leaders, economic developers, other people who are working with special causes to help them understand our approach and what we're doing, and to hopefully learn from them any lessons they have learned, and continue to build on this knowledge over time. That a large number of communities out there that need help is so huge that the only way that we can put a dent in that, or we can have impact pervasively through these groups, is to get into educational programs where we can collaborate with other people and share information. So I think that's important, but I think I'm going to start using Bill's term of disinvested rather than using the term of underserved, which we've already proved.
Oops.
So with that, we just had a little bit of an internet bump, and I switched side on my screens, and everybody else is frozen. So hopefully we'll get everybody back together here. So Bill, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This is one of the fun things with this broadcast studios. And on one screen you're frozen, and the other one you're apparently visible to the world in real time. And the good news is we're coming up on the end of the hour for today's program. So this audiovisual challenge will be kicked forward to another day. But Jeff, last words for people in our audience on today's issue of impact investing in communities.
Yeah, absolutely, Carl. Thank you, and thanks for your patience on all the technical issues as well. I really do enjoy talking about this, just because it matters, and it matters very much in terms of what you're saying and what Bill has mentioned, which is the education piece. I think I am such a big believer in education, and the impact that can have. So educating members of the community, educating the community leaders is so critically important in terms of making this scalable. That our effort is to do this not just in one community, hopefully in 62,000 communities. I don't know if we'll ever reach that point, but it would be nice. It would be nice at least if we could set a framework that allows others to be successful within that. And I think the key to that is education. So I'll look forward to the future discussions and broadcasts on this.
Thank you for that. And Bill, do you have any last thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience before we call it a day?
Oh, absolutely. No, thank you for that. And I want to piggyback on what Jeff is saying about the education. But I think that we have to look at the education of, the people on the ground, the leaders in communities and community redevelopment. And we have to look at education as simply a part of the infrastructure, right? That changes how communities view themselves, how communities spend their dollars, how communities are able and willing to invest in themselves. If people understand that, that when they invest, when they spend their money outside of the community, they're investing in someone else's community. And I mean, these are really simple concepts. And if you spend the money in your community and that money stays in your community, you are investing in your community. And I think that the educational piece is only a part of the infrastructure, right? So regulation crowdfunding is another part of that infrastructure. NC3's Diversified Community Investment Fund is another part of that infrastructure. The RCI Community Funds is another part of that infrastructure. So it's about building that infrastructure and then creating the bridges where people in the communities can get on to that infrastructure and onto that highway is what is really important, and that we don't silo education here, community engagement there, but that we look at this as one large highway system, going with that analogy, and that we help people to use this infrastructure, because if we don't look at it that way, things will get siloed and people will get lost and left off of the infrastructure highway.
Yeah, and I've seen a number of comments and talked with and continue to talk with people every day about what we're proposing to do. And we may start adopting the phrase financial infrastructure, whereas when we're talking with people, they understand the need for bridges and roads. They understand the need for sewer, for telecommunications. But what a lot of these communities are missing is financial infrastructure. They have no way to invest locally. They have no ability to create jobs locally. They're kind of standing on the sidelines watching money go somewhere else, and to some degree, the whole system is working against them because their jobs in another neighborhood because they can't find a job locally. Their residence is being paid for by a program out of state, out of whatever, and their rents are not staying locally. So the community is bleeding wealth, and so I see kind of summing up that our job as we take it on is to create that financial infrastructure where everybody has this opportunity to build their own wealth, but to also build it collectively as a community, which would in turn help them and help everybody else. So thank you guys for being on the show today. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Bill. Thank you to our audience for listening in. This program is recorded on LinkedIn. It's also being recorded on YouTube and Facebook. And that means that this recording will be available for people to view and see at a later time. So we'll be, inviting people to come back who could not make it today to see the recording. And we'll be here next week. Our speaker guest next week is going to be Stephen Schaff. Steve is going to be talking about community engagement, that point we mentioned earlier about working with and through a community, not handing down stuff to a community, not being an outsider, but making ourselves a contributor to the community as a whole by working with the people who are there. So I invite you all come back next week. I invite you to subscribe to our community revitalization newsletter. And we'll see you all next week. Take care, everyone.